Good morning, everyone. How are you today? Good morning, Jason Sumner. It's good to have you guys. C. Jones, good morning. Already saw Come Alive and Judy and Rick in there. It's good to see you guys. Rick Bowser out of the gate with a topic. I love it. Let's see. What does the Bible say about usury? That's a good topic. I'll put that on the list. Rick, it's on there. I really hate that I don't have music. This really bothers me. I think I need to let it bother me enough to get it fixed, to get it figured out. I think there's places I can use music. And just, YouTube is so touchy about everything you do now. So I just want to make sure that if I use music that it doesn't make the videos unavailable to people or, messes up our standing in their rankings or anything like that. So got a few more joining. Good morning, Jeannie, Stacia. Oh my gosh. I'm going to go to my grave saying that wrong. Chris Goolsby, good morning. Katie and Mom, good morning. C. Jones, I got your topic. Let's see. Historical archaeological evidence, the historicity of Jesus as Messiah. That's a good topic. Put it up here. Let's see. All right, let's do this. I need to get this on the screen for you guys. See the topics. We've got 2 so far. So let me change my screen up here. Get that on there for you. So good to be back with you guys this morning. It was a quiet week as far as me posting. I admit that. I recognize that. But, I'm working on a few things. You can see here some things I've been studying this week. I've been studying about Carl Jung, and there's a writing that he wrote in 1916 but didn't come out until 2009. It's called The Red Book. This is a very interesting writing. Kind of shows us some things about Carl Jung that are very scary. I've been studying the Tower of Babel. I want to finish up some research I've been doing on that. And I want to get that finished so I can make a video on it, what the real story of the Tower of Babel is. And I go to the sources of Jubilees and Jasher for that, mainly Jasher. I've been putting time into this movie. I mean, this may sound silly to you guys, but The Close Encounters of the Third Kind, it's a movie, and I'm going to put a video out on my other channel called Sci-Cry, SCICRY, about this movie in the near future. I'm in the editing phase of it. It's pretty dark, but if you didn't know, if you know that movie, but I'm just saying that we're probably going to show some things that you never realized about that movie. Very sad, scary things that affect all of us. I have also been studying with a good friend of mine some topics related to cosmology, including what is geodetic surveying and how that might prove some of the cosmology that we experience in our lives. I see 2, Armored Raven, Ashton Nichols, and Parousia. Good morning, guys. Thank you for joining. I did notice y'all are posting some topics. Let me get those on here. Let's see. Ashton, you said thoughts on 1 Corinthians 15 and 16. Yes. One of my favorite passages, actually. It's really something I could preach a whole sermon on, 1 Corinthians, just chapter 15. You could probably do 4 sermons on that alone. So it could be a lot of information, but maybe we can touch on some of the things in there in this session here today. Let's see. Come Alive. America is Egypt. Utah was the land of Judah. Would make a great topic if you know anything about it. The Red Sea was the Gulf of California. Interesting. I'm going to put that on here. I may have to address it in a different way because I don't know a ton about exactly what you're talking about, but I know some things. I know some things that might be related to what you're talking about that are provable, evidenced. So anyway, just want to mention that. Maybe I'll just talk about that at some point here in relation to your topic and your question, but your question directly is going to be hard for me without much information on it. But I do want to mention it because there's some interesting things we could talk about. Yes, sir, Ashton. And Ashton, if I just called you a sir and you're a ma'am, then I apologize. Just let me know for sure. You've got one of those cool names that's like I can't tell for sure. That's my bad. I think we corresponded via email, if I'm not mistaken. But yes, thank you. Okay, good. I don't want to make that mistake. Oh my goodness. There was a time, and have all of us done this probably? There was a time at the grocery store near me where the person working in the deli was, to me, unidentifiable. And I think in the midst of the conversation, I got so flustered that I actually called this person both a him and a her. And I got this look of death like you wouldn't believe. Yeah, and I'm glad I got my deli meats from that person before I said that to them. So I'm just saying though, if you're, got to make some effort to, I think, identify your gender when you're dressing for your day. Oh my goodness. I hope that didn't offend anybody. All right. Let's see. Armored Raven, Oriental Freemasonry literature mentions that America is Egypt. I can understand that because, okay, well, we'll talk more about that when we get to that topic. I'm about to get off track there real quick. All right, let's see. James has been doing homework. I see that. Yes. All right, make sure I didn't miss anything here. And by the way, too, I want to say this: if any of you you have a topic on the board and you're gonna have to leave early, just let me know. I can switch things around. By the way, I don't know if you guys realize this. Like, I mean, you have to by what we do here, but this is totally on the fly, right? I don't know, honestly, if anyone else online does this kind of thing. I was thinking about this, when I first was doing these live streams, I was a bit nervous because it was like, I don't know what they're going to come up with. I don't know if I'll be able to talk about it. So, my idea was I'll just approach it as if we're working on it together. And thankfully, I think over the weeks, we've done some good stuff, some good research. And thankfully, most of the topics I have either heard of or researched a little bit. So that helps. But anyway. All right, let's just see. Stacia, you said, how would you put the New Testament books in time order? That's a good one. I will do my best on that. I think I can get that pretty close for you, Stacia, as far as the chronological order of the New Testament books. That's a good one. I like that one because I have thought a lot about that one. All right. Armored Raven, you say the format is refreshing. Thank you, sir. I appreciate you. Thank you for saying that you love me because that means a lot to me, actually. It means a lot. I hope I reciprocate that in the way I approach things and do things for you guys too. You guys are great. Stacia, you say, what about the Death Valley being the Sea of Galilee? Interesting. This is stuff that I don't know that I've heard much about before, guys. So that's going to be a fun one. Jason Sumner, you posted on there a book recommendation, Rethinking the Dates of the New Testament by Jonathan Bernier. Some interesting things to consider. Interesting. Ashton, you ask if you can give your opinion about Revelation 20, where it says Satan would be released for a little while. Doesn't that mean for just a few years? That's a good point. Yes. I'll call that topic, is the little season little? Is the little season really little? Right. I know exactly where you're coming from, Ashton. I know exactly where you're coming from. We'll talk about that. Rafa Sieber, good morning. Thank you for joining. All right. That is some good topics, guys. And because of the number, and we're getting better at getting topics on the board, I think. So we'll go ahead and start working on these a little bit. Let me see about the order here. I want to go in. Is that... Let's see. 1 Corinthians 15 is going to be a big one, I think. Kind of a little just digging and reading. I may move that one to the end. Not for meanness sake, but just because. The New Testament chronological order, I think, is a good one we could do pretty quick up front. The little season little... That's a good one. Let's see. That's going to be a little discussion, but not a lot of discussion. America is Egypt. This one's going to be interesting. I don't know where this one's going to go, guys. Thanks, Come Alive. Throwing in the monkey wrench. All right. Historical archaeological evidence, the historicity of Jesus as Messiah. See something. Yeah, I have a book that I'm going to show as a part of that discussion, just because it's interesting to me. And I don't know how much information I'll really be able to give you, because this is not one that I have spent tons of time on. Historical or archaeological evidence to the historicity of Jesus as Messiah. It's tough. It's tough. The Bible about Usury. America is Egypt. Let's move little season above those. I think both these are Come Alives, right? Come Alives, lighten it up. And we'll do 1 Corinthians 15 before America is Egypt. For some of you guys, I'm just telling you, America is Egypt topic, what I'm going to talk about is something you guys will be just foaming at the mouth. So yeah, we'll, I hate to make that one last, but Rafa Sieber, you ask and give me another topic. What about Revelation 22:15? Could it be possible we are post-judgment and left outside the walls of the new earth, and not in the little season? That's interesting, Rafa. What I would like to do is, I'm going to put that on the topic list, but I think it's going to have to be in a future broadcast, because I have enough already. It's going to take us a long time to get through what I've got. So I apologize for that. But if you want to hang out with us this time, and perhaps next time I can address this, Revelation 22:15. I will say to Rafa that I currently believe that I currently believe we're in the little season, but that doesn't mean I'm always right either. So yes, you're right. In that passage, it talks about people being left outside. Okay. And so I think that discussion's worthy. I want to give it some time, but I also might need to look at a couple things before we do it. And so if you can hang on till next week, then I will try to address that for sure. Okay, let's get started then with first topic, the New Testament in chronological order. Thank you, Stacia, for this one. Let me get that put up on topic board. All right. So I think I'm going to have to do this on the fly because I don't believe that I have a ton of, I don't think I have this on paper. I don't think I've ever put it on paper. So that's good in a way. So let me see. I'm going to go somewhere real quick and grab a list of the New Testament books and put it on there. List of New Testament books. Here we go. Yep. Whoa, okay, come on. What's going on? Need to highlight all that, copy it, slam it in my document so we can mess with it. Okay, now we're cooking. Okay, now there's two things that we have to talk about. It's not always simple. And let me fix the formatting on this really quick. Okay, there's the better formatting. Corinthians 1 and 2, Thessalonians 1 and 2. I'm just doing this so I can get them in order very quickly. All right. Now, I think I'm going to remember all this, but there's two things we really got to talk about when we talk about the chronological order of books. Are you talking about when they were written, or are you talking about when the events in the books are happening? So, chronological, maybe we have to do this twice, according to events, and then chronological according to authorship. When were they penned? When were they written down? And so, according to events, you know, let's see, get these organized, get myself organized here. Let's do this. I'll just copy the whole list, put it in both, and then we'll work them as we go here. So according to the events occurring, right? That's definitely first the Gospels. Okay, Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. I believe Luke starts earlier, doesn't it? Luke has the information about Zechariah, and I think Mark starts a little later, and then John is, of course, I think John starts after in Jesus' ministry. I can't remember exactly, but I think this is correct, that Luke starts a little earlier historically, and then Matthew picks up. Anyway, so just according to the events in the books, Gospels of Luke, Matthew, Mark, and John first. Then I think Acts of the Apostles is good. Letter of Paul to the Romans is early. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Corinthian letters were earlier, as well as Galatians, Ephesians. I think it goes about like this. When we're talking about Paul's letters, there's 1 Thessalonians. Now, guys, this is where it's going to be a little tough. I'll be honest with you. I may have to go look at this again, but you'll see what I'm doing here. First Peter, 2 Peter, Revelation, 2 Timothy, I think. Hebrews, I believe Hebrews is actually up here. I think it's earlier, maybe earlier than Romans. Okay. Revelation, well, I believe was about 55 AD. Oh, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John. I'm not sure about the Johns. I'm really not sure about the Johns, but I'm going to throw them like that. Okay. Now, so this is interesting. Okay, I think what we're gonna have to do is kind of combine these. I think you saw what I did as far as order here. I'm gonna take this whole list off because what we're really talking about here is that Luke, Matthew, Mark, John were written. They were probably penned after Christ, died, resurrected. There's a lot of speculation. A lot of the secular scholars think they were written after 70 AD. But I don't necessarily believe that. But, whatever. I don't care when they were penned. The events in them, of course, happened, starting in about 3 BC through Jesus' life. Then the Acts of the Apostles, event-wise, that was happening right after Jesus' resurrection. So then really Paul's letters were pretty early, most of them. They were pretty early. That's why, in fact, Corinthians is one of the earliest. I think Galatians actually may be earlier. And I'm winging this, guys. I'm telling you, there's maybe some mistakes here, but this is how I understand it in my head. So Paul's letters were very early, like in the, I think, 40s, 50s AD, that these things were occurring. That's when it was written. That's when the things were occurring. The letter to the Hebrews, most people think that was Paul, if I'm not mistaken. But whether it was or not, it was to Hebrews really struggling with Christianity versus Judaism, okay, and understanding the relationship. And so to me, this definitely is couched within the time between Christ's resurrection and 70 AD. When exactly, I'm not sure, but I think it was about this time period. Let's say it was about 50 AD. And I could 50 AD. Now this gives us frames of reference for let's say this is 58 AD Revelation. So at least you're seeing my thoughts here. I see you guys are commenting too, which is good. Discuss it. Acts of the Apostles starts with his resurrection, so 33 AD ish, right? Oh, come on. Style it, man. Style it. There we go. 33, that's an interesting number. Right? Come alive? 33 AD. Just saying. Okay, 3 BC is really when the Gospels start, essentially, okay? So I would say that if Revelation is in 58, and, in here we're talking 55 AD, I think I think we're getting close here, guys. I think we're getting close. Revelation 58 AD. Now, the reason you'll notice I split up a couple of these books from their quote predecessors, right? First and Second Thessalonians, First, Second Timothy, First, Second Peter. And I'm not sure, honestly. I can't remember if Second Timothy should be included in these at the end. But I believe these were written after 70 AD. And some of y'all might get mad at me for believing this, for thinking this. But these books are not mentioned by the early Christian writers. So the earliest church fathers are like Clement of Rome, Irenaeus. He's a little later, but he's still one of the earliest. Justin Martyr. When the quote canons, meaning the lists of books that people accepted, start being talked about, these books were never mentioned early on. Never mentioned. So I am very skeptical and careful. Not skeptical. I shouldn't say skeptical. I'm very careful with Second Thessalonians specifically and Second Peter. I can't remember if Second Timothy should be here or not. I can't remember. Maybe earlier than this. I can't remember if Second Timothy should be down here or not. It may not. But Second Thessalonians and Second Peter both just a lot of skepticism from both scholars on both sides of the aisle on whether these two books were really written in the first century, like before 70 AD, or if they were later additions by Christians after that time period that weren't necessarily actually from Paul or Peter. So, and by the way, when you read these two books, especially from a historicist understanding, preterism, fulfillment understanding, the eschatologies in those books is very different than even their predecessors. So in First Peter, you get an idea that everything's happening, it's coming quick, people are scared. And in Second Peter, you have discussions about, well, there's people scoffing and people saying that it never will happen and all this stuff. Well, that just doesn't seem to be the flavor of what happens in the rest of the New Testament. There weren't people making fun of the Christians saying, oh, see, it's been so long and nothing happened, just like nothing happened like Christ said. Well, people weren't saying that in the rest of the books of the New Testament. So Second Peter's one I have a hard time with. Second Thessalonians is another one. It sounds the same way, same type of stuff. And it also doesn't read anything like First Thessalonians. Read them back to back. Read First Thessalonians and then immediately read Second Thessalonians. I would say in the same sitting. They're not that long. But you'll see the differences between those books and you'll ask yourself, why is it so different? And to me, these books are just ones we need to have our eyes wide open when we read these. I'm not saying they're deceptive. I'm not saying they're not a part of whatever God's word means to you. But I am saying that they are different. They are different than the rest of the books of the New Testament. So to me, it's important to be fully aware when you're reading every single book of the Bible, when it was written, who wrote it, the context surrounding it. And so that's kind of where I go with that. So does this list kind of help a little bit, Stacia? Rafa, you say you don't think it's fake, but written by another person. See, that's another thing that the scholars say, and I I'm not in a position of knowledge to know if I should say, well, I think that was written by another person. I don't know or have evidence that that is true. So I can't say that. I just know it seems different than the other letters. Jason, you mentioned Jude was not a believer until after the second coming. Therefore, he's left behind and the church became the church's representative. That's interesting. I think some of you guys probably, and you see I have Jude down here a little further. It could be even further than that. You guys are maybe onto something. I'm less studied, honestly, in some of the authorship things. It's a topic that is heated and really debated, and to me it feels like it's hard to come to good conclusions on it. So I've kind of left that one alone, be honest with you. So maybe that's a cop out. Sometimes I do cop out because it's a risk reward type thing. Like I can spend a ton of time trying to figure out all the nuance of who wrote what and when and all that, or I can go on to other things that actually matter more to me. And I'm not saying they don't matter, but to me, it's not as important as some other things. So I just haven't dug in as much as some of you guys have. So that's very helpful for you guys to be putting some of those comments out there. Appreciate it. All right. So I believe that takes us through our first topic as best I can do it right now. New Testament in the chronological order. So to get to our second topic, This is going to be, let's see, let me get in the window. I think this is going to be too long for my window. Yep. Let's see. Let's just call this. So the original topic, historical archeological evidence to the historicity of Jesus as Messiah. So I think there's a couple things I can talk about on this. I wish I had more. So for one thing, archaeologically, we have a ton of evidence that the things in the Bible that are talked about, the places, Golgotha, Pool of Bethsaida, the descriptions of different locations near and around Jerusalem, the Mount of Olives, everything that is talked about is archaeologically discovered. So as far as locales and places in the Bible, it's so well attested in archaeology that it's really silly to even question whether the Bible is based on real places, real things, real buildings, etc. And I know that's not exactly your question. The question is the historicity of Jesus as Messiah. So as far as the archaeological evidence really cannot prove Jesus was the Messiah. So do you see how that works? Like, what artifact would you ever find that would prove Jesus was the Messiah? You could prove maybe that Jesus existed. So, there's the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea that has been found. The Shroud of Turin, if you're aware, I'm assuming most of you probably are aware that the Shroud of Turin is supposed to be the wrappings that were put on the body of Christ, right? So if their assumptions or speculations, postulates about that shroud are correct, then that is evidence that Jesus existed, right? But it really is, okay, this is one thing I want you to think about. When have you ever asked for archaeological or historical evidence that Aristotle existed? Okay, so you got to double check yourself and self-correct a little bit. Everybody does. Why do we expect so much more things to have been preserved or happened with Jesus Christ than we do with any other historical figure? It's really, when you think about it, we have false expectations of what can be proven and what cannot be proven. What do we have in the case of Aristotle? We have writings that, well, in his case, we have writings that he wrote, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, and we have writings that other people wrote about him. There's no archaeological evidence that Aristotle existed. I don't believe any artifact has been found that had Aristotle's name engraved on it. So that would, of course, be an archaeological evidence, right? So if you are expecting someone to come out of an archaeological dig in Palestine and pull up a pot that says Jesus is Messiah, that's engraved with the words Jesus is Messiah, then you're kidding yourself. That's not going to ever happen. It's not going to happen. So just let's make sure our expectations for what we would find are appropriate. We don't have expectations that are just unsustainable. They're unfulfillable. And that we're not placing expectations on the historicity of Christ that we don't place on any other figure in history. I see a couple of you have joined. I had said hi to yet, and that's Deaf Bread and Razzie Wicks. Good morning. Thank you for joining this morning. Appreciate you. Ashton Nichols, this was your question, I believe. You say that's excellent evidence. In my opinion, only God's power could cause an image to be preserved like the Shroud of Turin. It's the best physical evidence we have. The Shroud is an interesting thing. I have a book on the Shroud of Turin. I've read, it's a really thick paperback like this. I think it's one of the most popular books on the Shroud. And of course, it's about the scholars arguing and debating over how real it is or not, and all this stuff. There's so much discourse over it, and of course there would be. Let's say it was real. Don't you know all the secular scholars would say, nope, it's not real, and here's all the reasons. So I'm not saying it's real or not. I don't know. I honestly don't really have a dog in the fight, because for me, whether that's real or not, Jesus is real. There's too much of the other kinds of evidence for Jesus. The writings are ridiculous. It's ridiculous how much writing we have about Christ. More than any other person in history, probably. And people still come at it and go like, why don't we have any evidence? Where's your evidence? Do you need evidence that Julius Caesar was emperor of Russia or of Rome at the time of Christ? So where are the people screaming, there's no evidence Julius Caesar existed? There's no evidence whatsoever. Now, I guess in the case of Julius Caesar, maybe I picked a bad one, because his name is engraved in things over in archaeological artifacts. Of course, he was an emperor, so they did that kind of thing. Jesus, on the other hand, was a rabbi that nobody knew at the time when he started his ministry. So what kind of evidence would you expect to be left behind? He didn't go around carving his name into things. I mean, so I don't know what to tell most people. I was going to mention this. You guys, if you've followed me for any length of time, you know how important it is to me to read extra biblical works. And I have 2 huge volumes of pseudepigraphal and apocryphal works, and they're all cataloged and assembled into those volumes by a man named James Charlesworth. And I wanted to at least show this book, and I hope it's visible. It's getting keyed out, but The Historical Jesus. Oh, it's backwards because of the way my camera is, but it's The Historical Jesus by James H. Charlesworth. And this book is a short, small book, but it's very interesting because I learned a little bit. For once, when I had read through the pseudepigrapha and apocrypha that James Charlesworth had assembled, I was just blown away, right? And that's part of why I've studied so hard, is to understand all those writings. So I did trust the man in the sense of that he had knowledge of all those things. And so I saw this book by him and I got it, The Historical Jesus. And what he does is he examines the textual evidence from a very critical standpoint. And he examines, let's see, what does the content say? I just want to mention this real quick, because this to me was very eye-opening, very interesting. The topic of why is Jesus research necessary and how is it possible? The topics of, let's see, when did the study of the historical Jesus begin and what has been learned? Is it important to distinguish between what Jesus said and what the evangelists reported? All these are interesting things, and I just have to say, he goes through sources, especially Josephus. That's chapter 3. Chapter 4, the Judaism of Jesus. Was he not the first Christian? Was he an Essene or a Pharisee, a Zealot or a Sadducee? And then chapter 5, his birth and youth, John the Baptizer, Jesus and archaeology. There's chapter 7. I don't think I've even gotten to that. I have a bookmark because I'm about 3/4 of the way through this. But this book, I'm just saying, this is a very interesting resource if you're interested. A lot more information than I would be able to give today, for sure. So Ashton, if we have met your criteria for answering that question, I think that that's about as good as I can do, unless I wanted to just study on it a little more and get you something. But I think that those things are important to think about, and the reality that we have a ton of textual evidence of Jesus Christ. And apparently, if you just studied the events of the first century separate from the biblical writings, meaning you study the historians, you would realize that something huge happened. And then it might lead you to study Christ, because he might have been that thing. Actually, he was. But I'm just saying, the first century was a pivotal moment in history. And so where else would be perfect for the Savior to intervene than in the first century? All right. I think we'll move on. I see you guys talking a little bit. I see Trinity 88's in the chat, and you guys are chatting along. Oh, Ashton, this was not yours. Well, I gave you credit. Sorry. It might have been C. Jones. Yeah. Okay. All right. All right, guys, let's move on to the next topic. What's our next topic here? Let's see. Is the little season little? It's a very good topic. And I'm trying to remember who posted this one. I want to say it was a newer viewer. Got to go back here in the chat to see. Little season. Yeah, that was Ashton. That's you, Ashton. Okay, now I'm getting the credits right. I in past sessions I have put the names beside the topics so that I didn't forget. But you see how short my memory is on some things. Sorry about that. All right, so is the little season little? I'm not going to go too long on this one. I think my views on the little season, that we are in it, are pretty apparent. I have lots of videos on this portion of Scripture on my channel, so feel free to search that and find them. But I'll bring up real quick Revelation 20, and we'll just look at a couple things before we move on past this, because it is important. So let's see. Okay. I'm gonna jump to Revelation 20. How many times have I burned this pathway? Revelation 20. All right. Satan's bound 1,000 years. Yes. I saw an angel come down from heaven having the key of the bottomless pit, a great chain in his hand. He laid hold of the dragon, etc., etc. Be bound 1,000 years, and then loosed a little season. So 1,000 years is a marker in the sand. We know there's 1,000 years of Satan being bound. What else is happening during that 1,000 years? I saw thrones, and they sat upon them. The judgment was given to them, the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Christ. So these are the tribulation saints from the first century. In my opinion, the 40 years leading up to 70 AD, from the end of Christ's ministry, his death, burial, ascension, the 40-year waiting period until 70 AD, when the temple was destroyed. Christ came in the clouds with his holy ones and defeated the nations, took authority, raised those from Hades that had been in there, and raised the souls of those who were killed for their witness, the ones with the white robes who would reign on thrones. Okay, that's all through the book of Revelation. So the things happening during the 1,000 years is Satan's bound. Christ is obviously reigning in verse 4, and the ones here that were beheaded for their witness, the tribulation saints is what I call these guys, they were raised to thrones to sit with Christ and reign during that time period. So that's what's happening during the 1,000 years. So then when the 1,000 years is expired, Satan will be loosed out of his prison and will go out and deceive the nations, Gog and Magog, a battle. They are on the breadth of the earth, and God rains fire out of heaven and devours them. The devil that deceives them is cast in the lake of fire, where the beast and the false prophet already are, because they were cast in there at Christ's coming in 70 AD. And they shall be tormented day and night forever. and then the great white throne judgment. Okay, so the statement of the little season, where is it that it says, verse 3, after that he must be loosed a little season. After the 1,000 years, let's just be clear. It feels like I'm repeating, but I'm trying to be super clear. We don't want to mess this up. People throughout history in the Christian community, as well as others, have been very sloppy with the way that they think about these things. So after the 1,000 years, he's loosed a little season. And during that season, what happens? During the little season, it tells us what happens after the 1,000 years. He's loosed. He deceives the nations. There's a battle of Gog and Magog. And God, ends that battle and then casts the devil into the lake of fire. And then there's a final judgment. Okay? So that's really... And the final judgment, by the way, if, go into the next chapter, it's, in my opinion, the end of the world. The end of the world. All flesh is done away with, and everyone's raised to be before God in the final judgment. Every man on heaven and earth, everywhere. So anyway, those are the things that happen during that little season, right? Satan is loosed. He's deceiving. There's a war. And then at the end of the little season is God culminating all of that. He throws Satan in the lake of fire along where the beast and the false prophet had been already for over 1,000 years. And then there's the final judgment and lots of new things happen. So the little season has to have some events in it, right? Maybe I want to do this. Let's do this real quick. Okay. It's good to have it visual because it forces you to remember what you're talking about while you're talking about it. So what happens? Satan loosed. Satan deceives. I think I spelled that wrong. War. Gog. Magog. Satan cast in lake of fire. It's a real place. The lake of fire is a real place. Final judgment. Okay. Yeah, that's really at the end. All right. So now the thing is, okay. Yes, based on, you're right, Ashton. It's hard because if if it is 2023 and Satan was bound for 1,000 years, then loosed, then the short season is what? 1,023 years so far, right? Well, sort of. So bound in 70 AD, loosed in 1070 AD. So 1070 to now is not quite that many years. 1070 to 2023 is about 50 years short. So 950 years. 950 years. I think that's right. Is that right? Or 40 short. It's 40 short. Anyway. Okay. Yes, that is correct. It's correct according to our modern timeline. Chronology. Right? This is where it gets hairy, Ashton. This is where it gets hairy. And so that doesn't seem short. okay, now there's one thing I can say about that. If almost 1,000 years doesn't seem short, but in prophecy, 1,000 years is kind of short. The prophecies, the earliest prophecies we know of, are from God to Adam, and the Jews had writings that talked about these prophecies, that history on earth for humanity would last 7,000 years. And according to Septuagint timelines and everything, that played out exactly as it should, and that now our time would be actually just past 7,000 years. So in the concept of a 7,000 year history, is 1,000 years more than a short season? I don't know. That is a way you can argue this. That is a way you can argue this. And if you don't mind, come alive, I'm gonna make you the moderator right now. Appreciate you. Thank you for doing that if you can. Let's see here. It just seems like there's some things. Yep. Okay. All right. So that's one way to argue this, and I have argued that before. Well, 1,000 years in prophecy isn't necessarily a super long time. I guess it could be called a short season. But then there is information from some scholars that think our timelines are totally messed up right now. And I have a video on this. I do have a video on this. It's interesting to me too. So a scholar called Anatoly Fomenko is the main person that people talk about when they talk about trying to correct our timelines and our chronologies. And my video is called What If Phantom Time? Because phantom time is the name for this idea that there is phantom time in our chronology, and we're not really in the year 2023, that we're really in the year something else. That it's not as, the number shouldn't be as high as 2023. And I will say, I'll spoil that video, but briefly, it's a good video. I think you should watch it because I approached the topic in a very careful way. But in my estimation, based on what I have studied so far, and there's a lot to study, I did not read Anatoly Fomenko's book. I think that would be a good thing to do. I wish I would do it. I probably should do it. Based on what I know, I believe that there's at least 500 years of messed up chronology in our history. So if there are 500 phantom years in our chronology, then that puts us at when? I don't know, 1500? Is that where we are right now? We might be. So then, Ashton, to get back to your question, is the short season short? Well, if the Catholic Church was responsible for messing with our chronologies, or perhaps some of the kings in Europe, that's what some of the postulates say, changed dates and our dating system. And we know they changed the dating system. You can look up the Gregorian calendar, you can look up the Anno Mundi calendar and the Byzantine calendars, and you'll start to get a sense of what happened and how things might have changed. But I'm of the opinion now that we probably have about 500 years missing out of our chronology, and that we should be at about the year 1500, which would literally put us at the very end of the 7,000 years that were prophesied for human history by God himself. And so that puts us at the end of the little season being then about 400 to 500 years. and to me feels more like a little season than 1,000 years or so. Yeah, Ashton. So you say you're gonna have to look into the time thing. You've never heard this before. It's very interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's a rabbit trail for sure. But let's just postulate. So let's say that there's no phantom time, that we're on the right year. Then I don't have as many good explanations for the little season, other than saying, yeah, even 1,000 years is little compared to all of history. But then if the phantom time theories are correct and we have missed a few hundred years, then it makes everything fit into lockstep. Everything fits. And so I just think it's something we need to be aware of, be careful of. And I can't give you a hard and fast concrete answer, but that's all I know. And that's what personally, my opinion right now is that we are at the end of the 7,000 years of history that God had prophesied, that we do have about 450 to 500 phantom years in our chronology, and that the year is not 2023. It's not been 2,023 years since Christ. I believe that number is more around 1,500. That's just what I have come to feel is correct based on what I've researched. So that is probably the best answer that I'm going to have. I hope that helps, at least for you to have ideas, things to study, to think about. And Ashton, like I said, my video called "What If Phantom Time," that's I think a good primer to the subject. It's not a complete treatise, but it shows you exactly what I'm talking about with timelines, and so you can visually see it and think about what's being said. There's also another researcher besides Anatoly Fomenko that I don't remember his name, but he also discusses the same types of things. So, all right, y'all are doing some good discussing. I'm gonna let you have at it, but I'm gonna keep going then on our next topic. Let's see what our time is. Woo! We're getting short on time, guys. It's going quick. It's going quick. Okay, let's see here. What do we got? Next on the list is dun, 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 dun. What does the Bible say about usury? Okay, let's see. Usury. Usury, and I spelled it wrong. What's wrong with me? Come alive. You're supposed to tell me when I spell things all wrong. Yeah, usury. Okay. All right. Oh, Squiffy Bear, you're here. Good morning, Squiffy. I initiated I christened a couple new administrators just because you were out. So, oh boy. Alrighty, here we go. Let's see. What does the Bible say about usury? I'm going to try to... I can't remember. I think the word is actually in the Bible. So I'm going to try that first and see if I get a hit. Let's see. Yes. Ooh, 17 times. It's nice. Exodus 22:25. Says this on usury. Oh, and you're not seeing my screen. Here we go. Sorry about that. Okay. So this, of course, in Exodus, let's see, what is the context here? If this is law, I believe. Yeah, these are the judgments that God is giving to Moses. This is Mosaic law that he's getting, rules for the Jews. And it says this in chapter 22, verse 25, if you lend money to any of my people that is poor by thee, thou shalt not be to him a usurer, neither shalt thou lay upon him usury. If thou at all take thy neighbor's raiment to pledge, you shall deliver it to him by the time the sun goes down, etc. You shall not revile the gods, etc. Okay. So, yeah. Now, this is interesting because, as you saw here, If you lend money to any of my people that is poor to you, you shall not be to him a usurer, neither shall you lay upon him usury. Usury is the collection of interest when a debt is repaid. So in this writing, in Exodus 22:25, it's talking about if you lend to people, it says that are poor to you. So if you lend to someone that is less wealthy than yourself, perhaps, you shall not charge him interest. Okay. Now, I'm not sure here whether it's saying just to someone who's poorer than you, or it's just saying that because that was the normal practice of lending. You don't lend to someone who is, of course, wealthy, right? You would lend to someone who needed the money, who doesn't have it. So I wouldn't assume just from what we're reading that this is only about lending to poor people, which might be our first instinct here. I think it's more about that you are not to lend and then charge interest on it at all, period. It's just assumed that the natural way of lending would be to someone who is less well off than you. So here's one verse, okay? So let's see what else we've got out here. Leviticus chapter 25, verse 36. And Leviticus obviously is more of the law. If your brother waxes poor and falls in decay. Well, now we are getting a reiteration of the poor theme. So if fallen into decay with you and you will revile, or if you shall relieve him, it says, then you shall relieve him. You mean help him. Yea, though he be a stranger or a sojourner, that he may live with you. So if you have a brother that gets in hard times, then it's saying, let him live with you, take care of him. But verse 26, take no usury of him or increase. Don't expect him to pay interest on things you're lending, but fear your God that your brother may live with you. Thou shalt not give him thy money upon usury, nor lend him victuals for increase. So lend him victuals, meaning if you take in your brother and you're giving him food, sustenance, shelter, whatever it is you're providing, he's saying in that case, don't charge him interest for that. Don't charge him. So I think that's the point here. It says also, if your brother that dwells with you gets poor and is sold to you, do not compel him to serve as a bondservant, but as a hired servant, as a sojourner. He shall be with you and shall serve you in the year of Jubilee, unto the year of Jubilee, and then he will depart. So this, to me, sounds like anything really that the law is getting at, anything that's taking advantage of a person in a weaker condition, a less wealthy state, someone that's in need. Anyone taking advantage of that person is wrong. Now, it does say that you could have them as a hired servant. So, they stay on with you, they essentially care for them, but then they do work for you, you pay them. That's an okay arrangement, but usury is not. Taking interest payments, something in addition to just payment for work or repayment for something that has been lent to them, it says don't do that. So this is it. This is what the Bible says about usury. It's not a good thing. In fact, I don't know that we're going to find anything that says, well, here's one that's interesting. Okay, here we go. Deuteronomy 23:19 says, you shall not lend upon usury to your brother, usury of money and of victuals or anything that's lent upon usury. So no taking any interest of any kind. Good morning, Kingdom Within. It's nice to have you, brother. And then Deuteronomy 23:20. This is interesting. Unto a stranger you may lend usury, but unto your brother you will not, that the Lord thy God may bless thee in all that thou set thy hand to in the land where you go to possess. In Nehemiah chapter 5, verse 7, I consulted with myself and rebuked the nobles and rulers, said to them, you exact usury, every one of his brother, and I set a great assembly against them. So I will say that based on Deuteronomy 23:20, it sounds like, and I know the Jews would argue this, that they are allowed to extract usury from any non-Jew. And they do, and have throughout history. They have acted upon that. I did the video recently about dispensationalism as the Trojan horse of the apocalypse. And in that video, I talk about this, but Martin Luther, the Protestant reformer Martin Luther, wrote a book called The Jews and Their Lies. And about 90% of that book is about them extracting usury from people and using it to control the societies wherein they lived. So, and that was, of course, Martin Luther writing about Germany specifically, saying that in Germany at the time of the 1400s, they were doing this, using it to their advantage to gain control over the financials of the area where they lived. Just something to be aware of. Let's see if there's anything new that's revealed as we look down through these scriptures. Nehemiah asking them to leave off usury and stop it. Psalm 15:5, he that putteth not out his money to usury or takes reward against the innocent, he that does these things shall never be moved. This is just encouraging that if you never take and get a loan, you can't be beholden to the usurer, the interest, retriever. So, advising, of course, this would be in all of our best interests if we never took a loan. Of course, I've taken loans. Most people in our society have taken loans. That's a whole nother topic of discussion. But you have to ask yourself, the usury that's a part of the loans we take, where does that end up? In whose hands does that end up? It's a journey of research that will take you to a place that may take you to the same place Martin Luther was talking about. Just saying. I wish it weren't so. I wish it weren't like that, but it really is in this world right now. In Proverbs 28:8, he that by usury and unjust gain increases his substance, he shall gather it for him that will pity the poor. So, the word usury always in the context of something unjust and wrong, like a way to gather gain from someone that is incorrect. It's taking advantage of somebody. And so, in things of our society, you have to ask yourself, like loans, car loans, home loans, all these different things, mortgages. Then also in terms of life insurance and other types of insurance, medical insurance, car insurance, paying for something that you don't have, is that almost not a form of usury as well? Rafa, you ask, wasn't usury illegal in the past? In many places all over the world, many countries, usury has been made illegal many, many times. In fact, the Jews were specifically kicked out of many different lands because of usury. And that's a way that the rulers of those places, especially in Europe, in different European nations, would get the Jews out because they didn't like them, and they would make a law against usury, and that was what the Jews were all the ones doing it. So as soon as they made the law against usury, they would use it to kick the Jews out of their land. This happened dozens and dozens and dozens of times over the years, over the centuries. So I think, Squiffy, you may need to mute Deaf Bread because he's just posting random stuff that doesn't even address what we're talking about. Deaf Bread, the point here is to work together on a topic, not to just go off on tangents and throw stuff around in the chat, and you're being a little annoying. All right, so on usury, it looks like that's what we're mostly going to see here. Just looking down to see if anything changes in any of these. Ezekiel commends those who had not given usury, etc., etc. Now in Matthew 25, this is interesting, Matthew chapter 25, there is a parable that talks about usury. Now, This is about the servants where he gave the talents. He gave the 1, the 5, and the 10 talents. And when the wicked servant with 1 talent goes and buries it in the ground, doesn't do anything with it, and then gives it back to the Lord when he returns from his trip, the Lord says, you ought to have put my money with the exchangers, and at my coming I should have received mine own with usury. So take the talent from him and give it to those which have the talents. So this sounds to me, you would think on first reading that this is Christ saying usury is okay, but really this has nothing to do with whether usury is okay or not. Because we know this parable is not about usury. It's a parable, so the story is given, but it means it is a context for other things. And so we know that when he's talking here about the talents, it is about what has been given to each person during this time period between 30 AD and 70 AD, in this 40-year period before he comes back at 70 AD in the clouds. And he's telling them with this parable that during this time, you need to use what's been given to you. You need to use it for the kingdom and build on it, and you will get an increase. But you are essentially tasked with using what has been given to you and taking that and making more of it. So the example here of usury is not saying you should go and, take usury from people. This is Christ endorsing usury. No, what he's saying is the example here being that with whatever he had given you during this time period, he was encouraging these people to go and make use of it and build it and increase it. Okay. And so in the culture, the way you increased money was perhaps to lend it to the exchangers, meaning the bank, just like we have a bank. This was the bank of their time, the exchangers, and they actually lived in the temple, which was sad. The money exchangers in the temple would take your money and you would get a receipt for it, just like the Rothschilds did in Europe when Lord Rothschild started doing this stuff. And then you would come back a few days later and you would get that plus interest, right? Because they had been able to use your money, quote unquote, in the meantime. Of course, that's a Ponzi scheme. That's what usury usually is. It's a Ponzi scheme. If you get involved in investing and expecting return, there's always someone else that's then on that return buying into the investment again. It's a huge loop. And that's kind of what the stock market is, honestly. Just so you're aware. You're probably aware. I don't think any of you guys are not aware. Okay. So that's about it as far as usury. I think that's all that the Bible really has to say specifically with that word. But I'm sure there's probably more information to be gained. Come alive. I just think that would require some new reading on my part. I bet some of the early church fathers probably talk about it. I'm curious a little bit just to see how many other mentions of the word there are. None. I don't get any in the writings that I've got. Now, it might be called something else if it is. So, anyway, I just wanted to hit that and see. But I think that's a good treatise on usury from the scriptures, from what we know in the scriptures. And if we wanted to do more, we could at another time probably. All right. It's getting on in time, guys. It's been an hour 15. Let's see what else we've got on the board. Let's see here. Topic-wise, what have we got? I may have to punt. You know what? 1 Corinthians 15:16. I may punt this one because there's no way I'm going to get that done in 15 minutes. Oh, I feel bad too. Who was it that asked about 1 Corinthians 15:16? Who asked about 15 and 16? Corinthians. I'm looking through my chat, just trying to find. This is just how it goes. Sometimes we just don't have the time we need to get there. Oh, Ashton, it was you? All right. I'm upset about that, but Ashton, I will do this one next time if I just will. I'll just take it and do it next time. Because the other one, this other topic is one I can address pretty quickly. The America is Egypt and Utah is Judah one, because I'm obviously a little short-handed on this one. So let's do this one, and then next time, Ashton, I will get to that. And if you can't join the live stream next time, then I'll still do it, and because it's going to be valuable for everybody. It's valuable even for me to go over those passages again and again. I love these passages, 1 Corinthians 15 and 16. So we will do that next time. For now, let's do, is America Egypt and Utah Judah? And is the Mississippi the Euphrates? And is, I don't know, is what? Okay. Interesting. So I think I'm trying to think of in my head, where do I want to start with this? Okay, so to begin, I don't think that I have heard anyone saying, come alive. I don't think I've heard anyone say before that America was truly the biblical Holy Land, and that it's been clouded from our understanding, and that the reality is supposed to be that America is Egypt and Utah is Judah, and that I don't know if that I've ever heard that said before. Okay, so you're bringing some idea that's totally new to me. Now, when you said it, though, it made me think of something. It made me think of, I think it's Sir Francis Bacon. And I think because he's a Freemason, and when he talked about America being the new world, I believe he likened it to Egypt. So that's what I immediately thought of when you said these things. Let me see if I get hits on this while I'm searching it. So I am looking up some stuff on this because... No, see, he's not mentioning Egypt here. But, I mean, of course, the pyramid on the dollar bill, of course, would give you this impression, right? That perhaps it was considered, that America was considered to be connected to Egypt. What other explanation can you have for this, right? There's a connection there. I'm not saying... So, again, I see this relationship through Freemasonry that they saw when the founding of America occurred, that they were trying to connect America to the new world, the phoenix rising from the ashes, the new Egypt, all these connections they made with it because they wanted it to become the hub of their power structure on earth. And of course, anytime anything big like this would happen in history, the Freemasons would try to get their dirty little hands in it and screw it up, right? Because anytime a lever of power and control is moving in the world, they want to be there to try to gain the control of that lever, okay? And that is definitely the case with America. There were Freemasons and honestly, there were Jews all involved with it. There was some early founder of America that said that at some point in our history, there would be a war with the Jews themselves, the Jewish bankers in America. So all this stuff was happening behind the scenes. And so for me to hear you talk about that just reminds me of that connection, not necessarily that there is some substitute that America, that the land of America and North and South America were actually the real Palestine. I don't think that that is something I've ever heard, and I also don't believe that's true right now. I would really have to see some major things to convince me of that, and here's one of the reasons. Here's one of the reasons. Because this right here, you see this? This is a map from 100 AD, a Roman map. And there's no America here. In fact, there's a Palestine and a Mizraim, which is Egypt. And there's Arabia and everything. This was the known world to them. This was essentially the known world and what the Romans wanted to be their entire kingdom. This was it. And so I have a real hard time believing that there's some mistake and that all of what happened in the Bible actually happened over in America. I don't believe that that is a point that I would believe right now. There's not any way I could believe that based on things like this. Now, there's another thing to discuss, though, related to this, and that is Bat Creek Stone. Is that it? No. No. So one thing that is interesting, and this is also what I'm thinking, I'm not finding it easily here, but I can. It's just I'm not finding it quickly. There it is. This is what it is. This stone was found in America, and it has Phoenician writing on it. So this is a thing. This is a real thing. It's a real deal. And this has not only been on this stone, but in other places in America, there's been Phoenician and I believe other ancient writings. Like Phoenician was, coexistent with ancient Hebrew. There's a lot of speculation that the ancient Phoenicians, who were the greatest seafarers in the ancient world, made multiple trips to America. Like they knew all about it. They were here long before Columbus or any of that. We get told this story about Columbus being the first to find America, but that's not really the truth. That's not really the truth. America was probably known, traveled to. It was obviously inhabited. There's indigenous people here, the Native Americans. There's the South American peoples, Mayans and all those cultures. Of course, they were kind of backwards. So now I'm getting into another topic, but I wanted you to see this. There have been artifacts found in America that point to the ancient world in the Far East. And I'm a little upset. I'm trying to find the name of that stone so that you can look it up on your own. Here's one that was apparently found called the Dighton Rock. I need to look some of these up and catalog them myself. Here's the Dighton Rock from 1893. These are ancient symbols from different cultures, Phoenicians. Here's what I was looking for. The Bat Creek inscription is what it's called. This is the stone I was talking about. It was found in 1996 by American paleontologist, and he speculated that Phoenician sailors were visiting the Americas around 350 BC because of this rock. It was Phoenician writing. All right, so there's all that. There's evidence that Phoenician writing existed in America sometime in the distant past. Then the other thing that is obvious is that giant races existed in the Americas in ancient times. And the giant races, of course, came from the time of, Noah, or started then, and then also after the flood, as we know from history. There were giant races even after. But you can see here some of this information. It's all over the internet. This is not what I'm looking for necessarily, but if you read, for instance, if you can find it, it's hard to find, the writings of Lewis and Clark. And there's was it Amerigo Vespucci? There's a few of these early American explorers just after the time of Columbus, or just before, actually, might have been. But they write about not only seeing bones of giants, they write about meeting giants, meeting races in South America that were live when they met them in the 1400s-ish, that time frame. Especially in South America. Like, as they were traveling around the coasts, there's one writing I read that the journalist, which was a explorer that wrote the thing, he says that they saw on the shores, following their boat along, they saw giants running along the shore and motioning to them. There's also writing about different explorers that went to the interior of where we are in the United States, to the west, and met and stayed and lived with giant races. In fact, some of them say they were Native American races that had as their leaders, they had giants as their leaders. So the genetically giant people were kept as the leadership of their communities. And then, of course, the normal-sized people were the people, the gentry. And so the explorer would be accepted into the community, and then when they meet the leaders, they realized they were giants. And so there's just a ton of evidence that America was covered with giants, that the Phoenicians and ancient peoples explored this area, that what can you say? I don't believe that the Americas was the ancient biblical lands. But I do believe that what happened in ancient biblical lands spilled over into the Americas. You have to ask yourself things about the cultures we do know about that were in the Americas. You have the Mayan culture, where they literally were, committed to sacrifice. Human sacrifice, child and virgin sacrifice to their gods. Well, that was a practice that was related to pagan god worship in the Old Testament and is connected to the races of giants and the cannibalism that occurred in the races of giants. There's also ancient legend that I've read about, I think with the Sioux tribe of American Indians. The Sioux tribes have legend where they said that all the tribes of the ancient American Indians, all those tribes at one time in our history in America, gathered together to finally wipe out the rest of the giants, because the giants were killing their food supply by eating the buffalo and were also eating people from their tribes. They were cannibals. And so when you see Mayan cultures and different South American cultures, they have those same traits. They have some cannibalism, they have some human sacrifice, something about blood drinking and all this stuff. What's another thing that's super awesome and important to the tribes of South America? Another thing that's super important to them is metals, precious metals. There are huge diamond, gold, and silver mines down in South America. In fact, it's speculated that the Mayans had gold all over the place. Of course, there's the ancient legends of the Mayan cities of gold. People have still been trying to find these cities, which I think they did exist. They probably all the gold has been taken or pilfered since then. But I'm just saying, all those things in the Americas are true, and they've all been hidden for a very long time. You know, you're taught very silly statements about America, like, oh, in 1492 Columbus sailed the ocean blue. That's when America was discovered, right? No. No, not true at all. So I don't know, Come Alive, that is what you made me think about with this question. There's just so much. There's so much on that topic that we could talk about. It's kind of hard to know where to focus, but anyway, I think that's all I wanted to say really about that topic for now. But if you have any additional comment, I can discuss. But I see you're making a few comments. Multiple maps show it. What are you talking about? Multiple maps. Columbus seeing mermaids, giants being seen, etc. Yep. There's all of that stuff. All of that stuff. The Annals of America. Thank you, Katie Turner. Appreciate that. If you seek, you will find. When it comes to this stuff, what's a really good book? I have a really good book on this. It's a really good book. It's actually so good and so comprehensive that I had a hard time getting through it. It was so much. They had so much information about giants in America. If I can find it, I want to share it because it's really the best one I've read. There it is. Yeah, this book, I'm going to show it on my screen real quick. This book is the best book I've ever read as far as evidence for giants in the Americas. And again, it's just huge. It's like 350 pages, and it's full of pictures. So you're going to see the news articles. You're going to see it all. It's not made up. It's good stuff. And this is by no means the only source, but it's a really good source. These guys that wrote this, Jim Vieira, I believe. Yeah, Jim Vieira and Hugh Newman. But that's a really good one. See, yeah, there's the whole thing. But anyway, I won't go any further on that topic, but I don't know if I even scratched the surface on your statement, Come Alive. But if there's more information you have on your original question, if I didn't get to it, then I'd love to hear from you on that. You can contact me on my website or email me or whatever. But the real history, I just wish that I really hope that at some point in history, in the future, that someone makes a concerted effort to uncover all of this stuff and do it in a way that is holistic and public, and given authority, given given weight by the scientific community. I guess my wish is that science in general would turn around and stop going the direction they're going, and then instead devote themselves to truth and honesty. Because science right now is a joke. Exploration, science, paleontology, biology, it's all just becoming a joke because they aren't honest and open with what is or has been discovered. So I really just hope and pray that in the future there is an acknowledgement by the whole scientific community that these lies are not lies. That's not the way to say it, but that these things are truth. What's the real history? Why can't we get a history book that talks about the real history? C. Jones, you say you're skeptical. You say the powers that be will not let that happen. Truth and honesty is long gone from science and the ruling parties. I hope that changes, C. Jones. I really do. Maybe it won't. But I mean, we can do the best we can do, right? And we're doing pretty good out here, I guess. We're doing pretty good. Hopefully, you say, Squiffy Bear, the scientific method will be utilized with truth and accuracy. Right. And it's so funny that we're taught that as children. You know, is it that we're taught that as children so we will believe that it's accurate and truthful and honest? And then when we get to the real world, we realize, you know, it's not honest. It's all fabricated. But because we have that childhood understanding that it's all truthful and on the up and up, is that what the tool is? They use that. They use schooling to give themselves credit in the long run when they come out with their retarded ideas about what science really is. It's amazing what they do, what they get away with. I guess that they're starting to not get away with it as much. We can only hope. Guys, I think that is going to be about it for today. Time-wise, we're good. I've had a great time. These are great topics. Again, Ashton, if you're still with us, I have your topic for next time, 1 Corinthians 15 and 16. And be aware that I do have a few things in the works, a few videos in the works. I think I will soon be doing a video on the Tower of Babel. I'm going to call it something like the real story of the Tower of Babel. And it uses the texts of Jasher to understand all of that. It's a very interesting story. Connects to Nimrod, connects to, you know, the pagan worship of Terah, Abraham's father. A lot of neat things in there. I'm going to be doing a book on this channel about Carl Jung, what I'm understanding about how his occultic beliefs got baked into psychology as he became a leader in the field of psychology. And I will have very soon also a video on my other channel, Psycry, about satanic ritual and movies like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, just for your information. So I guess that's it. Thank you guys so much for joining. And Trinity 88, what you just said about having everyone here on your prayer list, that is the best thing I could see anyone post in that chat. Thank you so much for that, Trinity, and thank you for joining. Please pray for one another, pray for this channel and our group of people, and pray that more people will see the truth and that we can help them in that way. I just appreciate you guys and your support. Have a great week. God bless you and take care.